Awesome. Okay, so now we can get started. Sorry about that. So my name is Dina Mansour. I'm the Outreach Coordinator with the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. And as you see here, this is Immigration in New Jersey, background, facts, and how to get involved. So we'll just be going through some Jersey-specific statistics, background. Here's a snapshot of what we'll be going through: myths, rights of undocumented folks, undocumented individuals, ICE practices and activity, and a call to action. We have a lot of information to go through right now, and we have great presenters on the line as well. So I think it's best that we just get started so we can get through everything, and I will be keeping an eye on questions for folks. Keep writing your questions in the chat box, and I'll make sure that we answer them. So yeah, without further ado, I'm just going to jump right into it. We have Erica Nava with the New Jersey Policy Perspective up first. She's going to talk about a portrait of immigrants in the U.S. and New Jersey. So Erica, whenever you're ready. You there, Erica?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, great.
Yeah, can you please, when I tell you, just move the slide, please?
You got it.
All right. So, hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My task this evening is to boil down a lot of information of demographic stats in a few minutes, and hopefully you will leave with a better understanding of New Jersey's diverse immigrant population. Too often the public and policymakers and even advocates tend to think of a monolithic undocumented community comprising of members whose lives are separated from the rest of the population, but the reality is far different. Undocumented immigrants do not live separate from the documented population, but instead live side by side in the same communities and in the same families. Let me start by giving you an overall picture of the U.S. and states' immigrant population. Nationally, there's about 40 million immigrants, in which which represent 14% of the total population of the U.S. It's estimated that about 11 to 12 million undocumented immigrants reside in New Jersey. Now, when people think of immigrants they think of California or New York, right? But New Jersey has as much immigrants as those two states, with about 1.9 million immigrants, making it the state with the third highest share of immigrants. It's arguably the most diverse immigrant state in the country. One reason why New Jersey differs from other heavy immigrant states is because no one immigrant group dominates. For example, in California, Mexican immigrants are overwhelmingly the majority of the immigrant population. Here in New Jersey, immigrants from India make the largest group, but not by a lot. Immigrants from Dominican Republic and Mexico are right behind. Now, immigrants are concentrated in three specific counties: Bergen, Hudson, and Middlesex. So even though they're spread around, they are concentrated in those three counties. Next slide, please. Now, who are these immigrants and why do they come here? So I'm going to describe five types of immigrants. Naturalized citizens are immigrants who have gone through the process of naturalization to become a U.S. citizen after he or she fulfills certain requirements established by Congress. Legal permanent residents are defined by immigration law as people who are granted lawful permanent residence here in the United States. They are also known as green card holders. And legal temporary immigrants are those that come here through a visa, and they are allowed to stay here legally to a certain amount of time. A popular type of visa is H-1B holders who are professional immigrants. Just to let you know, 80% of all legal immigration in the U.S. comes from family-sponsored visas. Undocumented immigrants who do not have any type of legal status might have come through the United States with a visa, but overstayed their visa. there was a study that was just recently released by the U.S. government that states that the country with most overstay visas is Canada. Now, there's also refugee and asylum seekers. Asylum seekers are those that are here in the U.S. and seek protection from their native country. Refugees are those that apply for protection while they're in their home country. Now, some of the reasons why immigrants come to the U.S. varies, right? Some of them come because of labor. There's labor demand. They come and follow other family members. They come from political conflicts in their sending country, natural disasters, and other reasons. Next slide, please. Now, the majority of immigrants in New Jersey are naturalized U.S. citizens, followed by legal permanent residents. As you can see from the pie graph, 55% are naturalized citizens, 25%, which is about 600,000, have LPR status. The rest, around 20%, are either undocumented immigrants or they have another other type of status. Next slide, please. Okay, so other type of immigrants include those with temporary protective status. There are about 300,000 immigrants nationally with TPS from 13 countries who receive protection by obtaining work permits and are allowed to stay here legally. But TPS does not allow them to seek a path to citizenship. Now, there's about 791 refugees in New Jersey from 2015 to now. There's about 19,000 international students, which represent 5% of the total student population in New Jersey. Next slide, please. Now, depending on what data you look at, New Jersey either ranks 5th or 6th highest on the number of undocumented population. So the range is between 450 to 500,000. The majority of undocumented immigrants in New Jersey have lived here more than a decade. Also, 62% do not have health insurance, and only 34% have an associate's degree or higher. The top countries of origin from undocumented population come from Mexico, India, and Dominican Republic. Next slide, please. Now, where does the undocumented population live? They live throughout the whole state, but they're mostly concentrated in five major counties: Hudson, Middlesex, Essex, Bergen, and Union. I only listed the counties that have more than 20,000 undocumented immigrants. Now, just to give you an example of how diverse the undocumented population is in New Jersey, for example, in Bergen County, the largest undocumented population is from Korea. Bergen County has about 12,000 Korean undocumented immigrants. Next slide, please. Now, I'm sure you heard about how immigration is bad for the economy. But research after research and data show that undocumented and documented immigration is an asset to the nation and to New Jersey. New Jersey has the third highest share of immigrants who are in the labor force, who are business owners, or owners of Main Street small businesses like bodegas and laundromats. New Jersey also has the fourth highest demand for professional workers in the nation. And also, just a nice fact here, first and second generation immigrants have founded 39% of the 19 Fortune 500 companies in New Jersey. Next slide, please. Okay. You might also have heard rumors about undocumented immigrants, them being a burden to the economy, but that's far from reality. Undocumented immigrants are contributors to New Jersey's social and economic fabric. New Jersey is the only state where working-age undocumented immigrants have started a business at a higher rate than legal permanent residents or naturalized citizens. There are homeowners as well. 24% of undocumented immigrants own homes in New Jersey. The average annual household income for undocumented immigrant is $35,000, around $35,000 here in New Jersey, which is less than the median income for all New Jersey households. Also, they pay undocumented immigrants do pay taxes. They pay around $500 million in state taxes and around $730 million in federal taxes, which a lot of that money goes towards Medicare and Social Security. Next slide, please. Now, sometimes mixed status families get left out of the discussion of undocumented immigration. So nationally, at least 9 million people are part of mixed status families, which are households in which one member or more is here legally and the others are not. In New Jersey, we have a combination of mixed status families that are composed of 26% of U.S. children who are growing up in an undocumented household. 9% of New Jersey U.S. citizens are married to an undocumented partner, and 6% of legal permanent residents are married to an undocumented immigrant. So also in the mix of mixed status families are those with DACA status. Just a brief summary of what DACA is. In 2012, Obama issued a policy directive that allowed undocumented youth who came here as children to apply for a work permit and for deferred absence from deportation if they met certain requirements. There is an estimated 20,000 undocumented youth who have been awarded DACA status in New Jersey. They are allowed to work legally, obtain a driver's license, and even take out a loan for a house or a car, just to name a few, some of the few things that they could do with a social and a work permit. Now, next slide, please. Now, it's estimated that Obama has, during Obama's term, he deported about 3 million undocumented immigrants. Trump has suggested that he would deport about that during his first term. And some of the consequences of deportation are not only directly, only the families are going to be directly impacted by the deportations, but all of us in the state. For example, just consider what would happen to New Jersey's economy if undocumented immigrants were deported. New Jersey would lose about $26 billion annually in economic activity if all undocumented immigrants were deported. Also, since New Jersey has the third highest share of undocumented workers in the nation, if we lose all the workers, we also lose their contributions, and New Jersey will feel the burden at a larger rate than California or Texas, because New Jersey's undocumented workers contribute to the economy, are more diverse, and still in higher paid industries than other states. Now, there some of the consequences are that there's family separation. There's mothers who become single mothers because of deportation. Just really briefly, a 2013 report found that 150 children have been separated from one or both parents. So that's something to keep in mind, and because it also affects the child's psychological development as well. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them towards the end of the presentation. Thank you. And there's a link to AJPP's site on immigration if you want to learn more about the different topics I discussed today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Erica. So we're going to move on to our next presenter, but I just wanted to say that if anybody had any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. I see that there aren't any questions yet, but we're keeping track of questions, so feel free to ask questions and we'll flag them. So now we have Carol Ruiz, of Wind of the Spirit. She's going to talk about a few myths that are going around, and she's going to set them straight with facts, law, and truth. So go ahead, Carol, whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Dina. Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Erica, for all those facts and stats. I'm going to throw out some myths and present the way we can use those facts and those stats and the law to confront them. One of the most common lies is that undocumented immigrants do not pay taxes. As Erica explained and proved, we absolutely do pay taxes, so I don't want to belabor that point, but of course we know that every time we pay rent, every time we make a purchase, every time that we work, even if we're working so-called under the table, taxes are coming out of that income and those expenses. So instead of focusing on the taxes, I'm going to focus first on the false dichotomy of the quote-unquote good immigrant versus the quote-unquote illegal immigrant, and I will affirm repeatedly that no human being is illegal. Second, I'm going to address the misconception that immigrants are criminals or that refugees are terrorists, for that matter. And third, we're going to address the myth that immigrants take our jobs. Finally, we're going to put to rest the lie that immigrants live on welfare and exploit public benefits. Okay, I'm trying to get to the next slide, but I don't think it's working for me. Can you all? Thank you. So the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965 changed the way quotas were allocated by ending what was called the National Origins Formula. This was a quota system, and it was the way we ran our immigration here in the United States, and it was based on national origins, and it was in place till about the 1920s. The new law maintained the per-country limits, but the Naturalization Act also created preferences for visa categories that focused on immigrant skills and family relationships with citizens or U.S. residents. So thanks to that Immigration and Naturalization Act, that's where we get the idea that we can petition, or the idea in the law that we could petition for our children, our parents, our spouses. If we are United States citizens, then we can petition for them to join us in the United States or to adjust their status if they are already here. This law, it's called the INA, this law defines immigrants as any foreign national except one legally admitted under specific non-immigrant categories. And I know that sounds confusing, but as Erica mentioned, some immigrants are here temporarily, and they're allowed to be here only temporarily. So we usually call those non-immigrants. So immigrants may include folks that we sometimes in the legal world call IWI, which means enter without inspection. Like me, for example, I crossed the border between the United States and Mexico without inspection. I did not have a visa, I did not have authorization, so then my status is IWI, entry without inspection. Others might have entered with a visa, and there's over 60 kinds of visas. You've probably heard of a work visa and a tourist visa and a student visa and a fiancé visa. And once those visas expired, if that visa holder remains in the country and is living here, is residing here, that person is now an undocumented immigrant. They don't have authorization, but they are residing here. Immigrants also include folks with DACA, which we learned from Erica as the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival, or folks with other deferred status. And deferred status simply means that the Department of Homeland Security and prosecution has decided that we're not going to deport you, we're not going to remove you, we're going to cut you a break, but it doesn't mean that you have lawful status. It just says, we know you're here, we're not going to try and deport you, you're not a priority for deportation, and in the meantime, you may be allowed to work here with an actual work authorization card. Other immigrants, again, like me, include naturalized U.S. citizens. So those of us that were not born here, but we are now United States citizens. It also includes legal permanent residents. So those are folks that are allowed to reside here, quote unquote, permanently. And that permanent isn't really permanent. If you commit certain crimes, then you can still be deported even if you have legal permanent resident status. I'm also including refugees, asylees, or special immigrant juveniles. As Erica explained some people may, because of persecution in their country of origin, may apply to come to the United States as immigrants, as refugees, or once they're here, they may apply for asylum, or like we saw with a lot of the news about the special immigrant juveniles, those young folks, young people who are coming into the United States, maybe not necessarily fleeing a war as legally defined, but a war situation like we saw in Central America. So they may be legally determined to be refugees, asylees, or special immigrant juveniles, or they may be fleeing persecution, domestic violence, war, excessive crime, poverty, but the law has not recognized them as refugees, asylees, or special immigrant juveniles. So I include them because many of us are in that position where we are fleeing persecution, but because of the way the law is, we do not get the actual status of asylee, refugee, or special immigrant juvenile. For many of us, we did not cross the border because we didn't want to come here legally or because we didn't want to wait in line. There is no line for many of us. There is no option to come in the right way. People cross the border risking their lives to save their lives. The visas, for example, are, in order to qualify for one, you have to show that you can afford to study in the United States, or that you do have a job here in the United States waiting for you that a United States citizen already here can't do or won't do. So it's not easy to get a visa, and people risk their lives to come here however they can. Non-immigrants, as we mentioned, include people who are here temporarily. And just like I mentioned that I entered without inspection, and I'm also a United States citizen, I do that to help us understand that immigrant status is fluid. So I was an unauthorized immigrant, and now I am a United States citizen. Likewise, a person could be a non-immigrant, somebody here on a temporary basis, and then that status could change, and it could change several times. So a great example of that is, let's say that a young man, a student, a college student, was a college student in Venezuela, and he applied for a student visa because he wanted to study in the United States. But then he was also protesting in Venezuela, and while he was here in the United States, he overstayed his visa because he was afraid to go back to Venezuela. So now that he has overstayed the visa, he's an undocumented immigrant. His visa is no longer valid. But because he could face persecution in Venezuela, he applies for asylum, maybe with the help of an attorney, and as long as he applies within the year and he meets all the many requirements for asylum, he could then become an asylee. So is this young man an illegal immigrant? Is he a model immigrant, a student, and an asylee who we want in this country to make us all better? No. He's simply a young man with an immigrant status that changed several times. No human being is illegal. If we could just go on to the next slide, thank you. And I keep repeating no human being is illegal because these terms, illegal immigrant, illegal alien, they're incorrect. They label the individual as opposed to the act, as opposed to the status. And these terms dehumanize us and criminalize us, and not just those of us that are immigrants or were at some point unauthorized immigrants or are unauthorized immigrants, but these terms are used to criminalize people of color generally, and Latinos specifically. Oftentimes, people who are perceived to be Latino are called illegal aliens and illegal immigrants, regardless of what their immigrant status is, because of course we don't walk around with our immigrant status, on our foreheads. So in addition to it being incorrect in terms of morality and the social realities, it's also incorrect because unauthorized status is a civil offense. It is not a criminal offense. It is not a crime to be present in the United States without status. In fact, even entering without inspection, like I did, is just a misdemeanor. So it's the way that I try to help folks understand it is that labeling a person, an immigrant, illegal is like labeling a defendant in traffic court illegal, or calling them guilty before the conviction has even been made, or even in criminal court, calling somebody guilty before a verdict is rendered. So as I mentioned before, while this immigration status is fluid and can be adjusted, many of us are left without that path to citizenship. And one of the many reasons that people are left without a path to citizenship includes the timing, when certain laws passed, when you apply for asylum, and of course the trauma of persecution and the poverty that many immigrants may suffer through keeps them from adjusting their status, keeps them from hiring an attorney to help them through this long, complex process. It includes the immigration laws that passed in 1996. These laws made it even more difficult, more punitive, more restrictive, and these laws separate families because if you remember when I was talking about the INA of 1965, we talked about the way that you could adjust your status through family. After 1996, an unauthorized immigrant who entered without inspection, who crossed the border without any permission, any authorization, even if such an immigrant were to marry a citizen, they may not be able to adjust their status. Those laws, the 1996 immigration laws, punish people with what we call 3 to 10 year bars. So it means that even if you marry a citizen, you have to leave the country for 3 to 10 years as your punishment for entering without authorization to begin with. And even though there's a possible waiver for the punishment, again, it's a long, complicated legal process that often requires an attorney. And if you do not make it through that process, you could end up in deportation proceedings. So it is a very risky decision that immigrant families are forced to make when some of them are citizens and some of them entered without inspection and are looking to adjust their status. Next slide. Thank you. We all remember, of course, the infamous anti-immigrant rhetoric of the last presidential campaign cycle that called immigrants criminals, and it wasn't the first time. In 1996, we also had a rise in anti-immigrant sentiment, and we were criminalized. So let's make it very clear, we are not criminals. Immigrants are not criminals. This myth is particularly fun for me to debunk because even the most conservative right-wing or anti-immigrant websites and think tanks have to admit the facts are right out there clear to see that those of us born in the United States actually commit more crimes than those of us that are foreign-born. So even according to the Cato report, which some of you may know, Cato is a conservative think tank, and this is from March 15, 2017, undocumented immigrants were incarcerated at a rate of less than 1%. Even if you include the times that undocumented immigrants are incarcerated for immigration reasons only, which of course we remember is just a civil offense. And just like immigrants are not criminals, refugees are not terrorists. Those fleeing persecution, whether legally recognized as refugees or not, are survivors of terrorism, of war, of persecution. And like immigrants, refugees are human beings. They are not model refugees to be pitied or idolized. They may be suffering from PTSD, from depression, or other mental illnesses due in part or in whole to the persecution they suffered. So unfortunately, if a survivor of persecution suffers a mental illness and self-medicates with illegal drugs, that could lead to deportation. So this criminalization of immigrants or idolization of refugees puts us all in danger because it opens up doors for ramping up the deportation machine that we have seen. Once we are charged with a criminal offense, and that could even include a DUI, although a DUI is not a crime under New Jersey law, immigrants may become deportable or removable, and even this could be true even without a conviction, even after time served, and even after many years have passed. So we call this, and imagine you all may have heard this term, crimmigration. So a person may, let's say, get stopped, be charged with a DUI, and maybe get a fine, maybe do some time, maybe lose their license for a DUI, and then later have ICE officials knocking on their door, maybe even as long as 10 years later, because that DUI now could put them on in line for deportation proceedings. And this is why it's crucial that local law enforcement deny requests to do the work of federal immigration agents, so that families aren't separated due to the crimmigration system. And it's important for us all to remember that Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE detainers, those requests are voluntary. Municipalities do not have to honor those, and they don't break any laws by refusing the request. And this is what often people talk about as a sanctuary city, are those places where the local resources are used to protect a community instead of to enforce immigration law. Next slide, please. And Erica provided us with some statistics to show that we are job creators, not takers. In addition to what Erica shared with us about business owners in the country and here in New Jersey, it's important to know that each immigrant, each one of us, creates 1.2 local jobs for local workers. So most of them are going to native workers, and 62% of these jobs are in non-traded services. That means they can't be outsourced. So, for example, each immigrant creates 1.2 local jobs in terms of teachers, hospitality, hotel workers, restaurant workers, retail, construction. So not only are we job creators, but we create job stability. These are jobs that can't be outsourced. And we are twice as likely to start businesses as native-born United States citizens. And as Erica taught us, 29% of New Jersey's immigrants are business owners. These business owners, these immigrant-owned companies, are more likely to hire employees than companies owned by native-born citizens. So the next time somebody tells you, I don't have a problem with immigrants, I love immigrants, I just don't want them taking our jobs, you have nothing to worry about. We're actually making jobs. Next slide, please. Thank you. And finally, our last myth, and the most frustrating one for me, no, we do not live off of other people's taxes. No, immigrants are not taking your food stamps. No, immigrants are not constantly on Obama phones or living off Social Security and SSI disability benefits. As a matter of fact, these same 1996 laws that restrict the way that we can petition for our loved ones, for our family, also restrict the possibility of even the neediest immigrants to get public benefits. Undocumented and recent immigrants are ineligible for the major federal public benefits like SNAP, which is the food stamp program, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, for non-emergency Medicaid, for SSI, disability income or Social Security, for TANF, so cash assistance. All of these are inaccessible to undocumented immigrants, to people with temporary visas, and even inaccessible for legal permanent residents if they've been in the country with legal permanent resident status for 5 years or less. So it's a completely false narrative. And not only are we barred from the public benefits, but many of us even hesitate to enroll in critical health care or job training or cash assistance programs, even when we are eligible, due to the fear and confusion caused by the chilling effects of these 1996 laws. So you may come across legal permanent residents who are surviving poverty and still refuse to apply for food stamps because they are afraid that that will bar them for applying for citizenship later on, or because they are afraid that ICE will knock on their door if they try to get food stamps for their children, even if those children are U.S. born. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you so much, Carol. So up next, we have Joanna with the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice, who will go through the rights of undocumented individuals.
Thank you, Dina, and thank you all for being with us today. So this is going to be pretty short, and I will preface this with, one, I am not an attorney. Carol is, so I'm sure Carol can also, I guess correct me if I'm wrong on a bunch of these. But these are the rights that we have been really working on and organizing around doing Know Your Rights and training trainers to do Know Your Rights, because we really want to make sure that immigrant communities understand what their rights are in order for them to better prepare themselves to interact with immigration enforcement if they do. And this goes along with sort of the myths of communities. And, a lot of folks say, well, if you break the law and you broke the law, then you have no rights. And this has been something that we've heard, not just in immigration, but in any other issue, right, like Black Lives Matter and others, where we sort of assume that someone's humanity and rights or human rights somehow fail to exist based on what we think they consider to have done wrong. And it's important for us who are advocates and trying to work on immigration that we understand that the Constitution protects a people regardless of their immigration status. And so folks, I know some opponents of immigrants' rights issues will say, well, the Constitution, you broke the law and the Constitution is for U.S. citizens only. That's not the case. You can go back to the Constitution. It doesn't actually say that. It's regardless of immigration status, which means that all those rights, immigrants have them. So they have the right to remain silent. They have a right to an attorney if they're not, if they can afford one in terms of like the criminal convictions. One is not afforded one for civil convictions. So I know, as we heard from Erica and from Carol, because immigration status is a civil offense, not a criminal, then they actually don't get an appointed attorney the way you would under a criminal offense, but they still have a right to ask for one. You have a right against unreasonable search and seizures. So you could still have the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the First Amendment, all still apply for undocumented people, which means they do have the right to not let ICE into their home. They do have the right to not answer their questions. They do have the right to not answer questions until they have an attorney present. These are really important for us to know, because that means that undocumented immigrants in the United States are not, just defenseless folks that we feel we need to somehow, protect against the really bad federal government. I mean, yes, the federal government has been targeting us, and we understand that, but there's some sense of empowerment and some sense of creating this autonomy when immigrant communities understand, regardless of their immigration status, that Constitution is also ours, and that we respect that Constitution and that we abide by it regardless of where we're from and regardless of what our immigration status is. So those are very quickly sort of what that is, and it's important for you all to know if you want to know more about the in-depth ways that folks can exert these rights. We can definitely be in touch about training you on educating folks or having folks get educated on their rights. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. I'm quickly going to go through a question that we hear a lot is if folks are here escaping some kind of persecution back home, why don't they just claim asylum? So Erica and Carol both went through it, but I basically want to go through exactly what this fear of persecution entails. So this is based on the 1951 United Nations Convention and 1967 Protocol. A fear of persecution is something that you need to be satisfied in order to obtain asylum status. And this would include persecution based on your race, your religion, your national origin, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. So these are things that need to be satisfied. It's also worth noting, and I think Carol and Erica rightly mentioned this, is that it's a lengthy process to become a political asylum in the United States and elsewhere. There's backlog for ages. It takes years, and while folks are waiting for this process to take place, they might be waiting in detention for all of this time. So it's not as simple as going to an office and asking for political asylum. It's not that easy, and folks really need to understand that. And also, it's very difficult to satisfy the requirements. It might seem very broad, right, race, religion, national origin, but it's not actually the case that it's easy. There are statistics here, I think, if you can see it. They're kind of small, but The reason why I put them here is also to show that the top 10 countries that do receive political asylum, they do not match the snapshot of immigrants that are located in New Jersey. So the thought that even the immigrant population in New Jersey could easily get political asylum, this graph just shows that's not the case. As you can see, China, Egypt, Syria, Ethiopia, and Iran are the ones who are the top countries receiving asylum, and we don't really have many of those immigrant populations in the state of New Jersey. So that might seem a little out of place there, and we've spoken about it earlier in the presentation, but just to set things straight and so folks understand that political asylum is not something easy to obtain. So I'm going to switch it over to Serge, who's going to talk about undocumented individuals in New Jersey, ICE practices, and their activity here. So Serge, whenever you're ready, I got the slides, so just let me know.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dina. I think this is a very comprehensive presentation today. And those who are listening are in here today for a treat because we're covering it all. So I am going to talk about these 4 key points: the idea of the detention complex, the implications of detaining people in county jails, local jails, and the strategies for deportation that ICE is currently using. And fourth, I will be discussing what ICE has been doing in New Jersey over the past few months. And obviously, the last one will be the implication of ICE practices on families and the country as a whole. Next slide, please. So, it's important to understand how much money, are we talking about here? Because when we talk about detention complex, it means that it is a set of businesses. It involves different actors, different partners. You're talking about the financial sector, the health sector, the food industry, communication. So you're looking at every single sector that you see out there, including technology. All of that is involved. So currently, it's about $2.5 to $3 billion industry. Now, Trump is planning to increase that amount by about 1.5 to 2 billion. So you're looking at the size of the business that's about to grow, because the projection is that we may end up detaining even more people, up to 80,000 people in immigration detention. But today we are at 42,000. So you're looking at a very vast growth of this business. And that's why if you've been looking at the stocks of these main companies like Geo or the Core Civics, you will see how the price of the shares keep rising. And because it has become something very valuable in the business sector. So across the country, there is about 200 detention centers. You're looking at a combination of private detention centers and county or local detention centers, which are government, local government detention centers primarily. Now, the reason why there's this big growth is because there's a bed, what we call the bed quota. We also call that the bed mandate, which was a decision from 2009, 2010, that was mandated by Congress that at every given time, at least 34,000 immigrants must be in detention. So on a regular basis, there's this thirst to keep that many people in detention, because if it is not achieved, that budget is going to have to be returned to the government, or next year or the following year, they may have to reduce the amount of money that's allocated for detaining immigrants. And that's why it's like a beast that we need to keep feeding, and all the businesses involved need to make sure that they capture the amount of money that the federal government is putting out to house undocumented immigrants. Now, currently, we are beyond 34,000, beds. So we are now at 42,000 and even more. So there are more than 42,000 immigrants in detention right now as we speak. This is the biggest number we've seen, and with Trump, that number is definitely not going to go down because he has promised, even when he was still in waiting, to deport 2 to 3 million. Even though some studies are saying that technically he cannot be that high, but he's claiming that that's something he's going to do. And if you've been following the news, you could see that he is currently putting together in place. Even just today, the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, said that, they are now going to, put some mandatory sentence for those who are coming back into the U.S. It's like 2-year mandatory sentence if you have been deported and then you return to the U.S. You have to go in jail. And he's actually recruiting a bunch of U.S. Attorneys and or prosecutors to ensure that that's happened. That's a statement he made today in Arizona, I believe. So there's a lot more coming up. So we are in definitely for a very, very horrible situation. Now, the top 5 states with the most detainees are Texas, California, Arizona, Georgia, and New Jersey. So we rank 5. Which means that we need to get even more active in New Jersey. We heard from Erica. We cannot just sit by and just say New Jersey is not among the top. New Jersey has been at the highest level for a very long time. We need to do something about it. Now, over 60% of people are held in privately run immigration detention facility. And the big 2 companies who currently house immigrant detainees are GEO and Core Civics. And they detain 1/3 of everybody in privately held in privately owned prisons. So there are also about 1 or 2 dozen other companies that they may be purely private, but these 2 companies are actually publicly traded, and that's why it's very important to keep track of them. Their stocks are going high. We need to make sure that we have campaigns all over our states to push for those who are trying to invest into prison stock to divest, because that's another thing that we can work on to ensure that these companies don't get too big. If they see more resource coming in, the stocks are going to keep rising, and it's going to basically feed the beast. So, and with such a system that is preying on the undocumented, it obviously going to violate, civil rights. In order to make more money, they will be cutting down on food, they will be cutting down on health care, and all the services that I can think of. They will cut down to make sure they increase their profit margin. And obviously, you've heard about deaths. That's the direct consequence. Many health complaints. I believe in 2013 there were about 13 deaths. I think overall so far, I think since over the past 10 years, they're talking about 150 people who died in immigration detention. So that's a lot of people dying while they are waiting for their immigration proceedings, because like some of the presenters have said, it is just an administrative detention. So, and obviously, the lack of due process is at the core of all of this. Even when the immigrants go to court, the system of treating their case, they may not receive a translator, and even when they are a translator, it may be on the phone and maybe bad quality. And we've heard cases of translators not being able to understand the language, but they pretend they understand. And because a prison guard or the prison officer who is facilitating the communication doesn't understand the language, he cannot really, make distinction between, what's good and what's right. And then you're talking about circumstances where the quality of the court is pretty horrible. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the implications of detaining folks in county jails. The county jails are a very good opportunities for the federal government to find beds, because the federal government doesn't have the means to deploy that many beds, suddenly when there's an increase in arrest. So county jails are always there, ready to provide the beds, ready to help out the federal government. And you've heard a lot about, 287G agreements, and that that ICE is signing with all the counties in our state, or that ICE is trying to sign with all the counties. And as a matter of fact, Trump requested that all the counties, all local law enforcement enter into this agreement. That's one of the conditions. Otherwise, he's going to have to take money away from those local governments who don't want to support his plan. So, and I want just to quickly say that, the history of 287G starts from 1996. It is also part of the Immigration and Nationality Act. And I'm sure you've also heard about the 1996 laws that basically expanded the criminalization of immigrants and other minority groups in the U.S. It has, if you search a little bit around 1996 laws, you're going to understand that, many of the troubles, like the growth of the detention complex, whether it's regular jails or immigration detention, it all expanded with these 1996 laws. And so there are two main types of 287G. There's what they call the task force, and also the jail system. And the task force system is the kind that basically the local police is empowered. It's a special unit that goes around and basically check people's immigration status and just round them up and send them to jail. But the jail system is the kind that's located within the detention centers. And basically, the 287G allows the selection of a member of the jail staff. They usually want to pick the best candidates, the people who have the best potential, and then they send them in training. I believe it's in South Carolina. And when they go there, they learn how to become an immigration agent. So when they come back, they basically act as if they were immigration agents. They can access the database of the federal government. They can also issue what we call detainers. I'm going to talk about that further, because the detainers are the key tools allowing those de facto federal agents within local jails to basically go around and identify which detainee may have may be undocumented. And when they identify, they immediately transfer the person from the regular jail to the immigration jail. And that's how the deportation process starts. So, the other reality is that because these people are coming from the same institution that they used to work, they know everybody within the county jail. They have connections within the county jail, and then those connections allow them to go far beyond their reach. They can just stop by and say, hey, do you have anybody new here that I can pick up? And they don't even need to provide the detainer, which I also call administrative warrant. These are not judicial warrant because we have to make the distinction. So you are looking at the local system and the federal system that are basically merged together, and it makes the system more smooth into identifying immigrant detainees or people who are undocumented among regular jail population, and basically shift them into just the next room down the hall. And now you're in immigration detention and your deportation starts. And also, usually, they can also, if for example you are, let's say you are a green card holder, and then you commit what they call an indictable offense. And so you go in jail, you expect that after serving your time, you're going to be let go. Nope, you are not let go. By the time it's time for you to go, they have already identified that you are, because you committed a crime, whether you had a green card or not, you're suddenly ready for deportation. So, and that's how it happens. So having a green card does not really protect you from deportation, as long as you have an indictable offense, which can be a DUI, for instance. So let's go. Okay, and here, for example, we have a few counties. Currently we have 4 counties in New Jersey with a 287G agreement. We have Hudson County, and these counties, Hudson County renewed its 287G agreement just last year. Monmouth County renewed last year, and Salem County renewed last year, and Cape May County, they just signed the 287G agreement this year. And I must say that the 287G agreement does not actually give money, because the county itself still need to train and to pay for the staff. But what gives money is a separate kind of contract, which is what we call the bed contract, or which is the result of the Intergovernmental Service Agreement, IGSA. So, and this agreement is what brings money. It's, for example, in SF County, which does not have a 287G agreement, they do have the biggest bed contract in New Jersey, which is, I believe, 1,200 beds, while Hudson County has a bed contract of, I believe, 750, and Elizabeth, I believe, 300, and a little bit less, Bergen County has another bed contract as well. So you have a 287G agreement, which is something separate. I also have the bed contract, which is something separate. Next slide, please. So, like I mentioned before, I'm just going to say it again, just really very quick. An immigration detainer is a tool used by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement when the agency identifies potentially deportable individuals who are held in jails or prisons nationwide, and they are issued by an authorized immigration official or local law enforcement officer to acting as an immigration official under Section 287G, which is just what I just described here. This is a quote directly from an ICE website, so it is plain and simple. There's no way around it. So I am going to quickly, kind of point out some of the key facts here why our county jails are actually, holding on to these contract with the federal government. Here are a few examples. Essex County project this year to make about $36 million in revenue. So this has become the biggest money maker for our counties, because the regular jails are not giving any money. But when the federal government brings big bucks, it's a bonanza. So Hudson County project $21 million in revenue this year. And so this is what's drawing everybody, around this big, pot of money. It's, I've heard so many elected officials, speak very proudly about, how immigration detention is making the county wealthy. I don't think this is the kind of money that we want to see. And even when you use the analogy of karma, if you take this kind of money and build a playground, you want to ask yourself, what kind of system are we setting in place? What kind of wealth do you want to develop for our community? And that's something that we need to dig deeper to find out exactly how, embedded are we into using, into destroying our own community because we want to build something, in our community that we hope is going to advance the development of our counties. So, and we need to do some soul searching on these issues, because, I don't want my kids to go into a playground built with prison money, period. Next slide, please. So let's talk about our strategies for deportation. Now, I know many people have been asking, well, or we've heard people say, well, Trump is just continuing the job that Obama started. So when you say Obama versus Trump, it is clear that, there's a lot more anxiety in our communities these days. Obama was around 2014. Obama shifted everything to what we call the priority enforcement program, which was basically, based around one single principle. They would arrest the criminals and deport them. They were the priority. But under Trump, there's basically no priorities. Anybody who's in the U.S. can be deported. And that's why he's investing $1.5 billion, in additional funding. And that's what he requested, even though currently in Congress, the Republicans and the Democrats are not very happy. They don't want to give him that money because they believe, he doesn't really need that much money. So he may end up getting it. So we don't really know. We just need to try to make sure that our elected officials are not going to be voting for this kind of crazy bills. And this is just for the past budget. This is not for any new budget. This is for the budget that's still ongoing, because he wants to build the wall. He wants to hire 5,000 CBP, Customs and Border Patrols, and he also wants to hire 10,000 ICE agents. And for that, he needs money. And obviously, we know that for the deportation to really happen, they need to do all these unfair hearings, lack of due process, everything's just done hush-hush, no translation. The bond hearing is really awful. Even the bond guidelines that the ICE has put out there is not respected at all, because technically you have to look at the condition of the person, before, deciding how much money the person can afford. But, they don't really care. The judges, they just slam on the table, if you don't have it, you stay there, you rot there while waiting for your deportation to happen. We are also hearing that ICE is now picking people up very frequently. I think, at least among us, we've all heard story of someone going in for checking. It used to be just be a formality. Now checking has become very, very stressful. You go in for a check-in, and then that's the last time your family sees you. They stay out there. You just see the door being slammed in your face. Your family member has been taken. And we've also hearing about arrests in public places. Just about a few weeks ago, we heard about people being picked up at bus stop, people being asked their immigration status just because they look like they may be immigrants. And so these are the situations that we need to try to also talk to our community to see how we can watch out for ourselves, because you don't want to get into a situation where you're going to need a lawyer. We have to try to be very vigilant and see how to help each other and try to identify these places where someone can be picked up and try to stay away from these areas. And obviously, we have the mass deportation of the newly arrived. So, for example, during the past few weeks, you've all heard, or the past few months, you've all heard about the situation of the Haitian immigrants. We've had a flood of immigrants entering the U.S., and as soon as they're in, the system works very fast, because they've completed the system of the immigration system in the U.S. USCIS could not actually process all the Haitian detainees. They were overworked. So it was just a hush-hush, They didn't have enough translators because they all spoke Creole. So they literally shipped them out of the country. And this was aided because the Embassy of Haiti, the United States, was also very willing to issue travel documents to facilitate deportation. So, and that's something that hurt very much the Haitian community in New Jersey. And one of the last point, the mandatory detention laws. You have long time spent in detention. I met someone who spent a year in immigration detention. This is someone who was seeking, who was an asylum seeker, who was supposed to be there for 180 days, but he ended up spending more than a year in detention. So we have many cases like that. And the reason why they're there is because there's no incentive to let them go. People are making a lot of money. The county is making a lot of money. The other services, healthcare system, everybody's making some money. So, why rush? So this has become the default system of really, creating an economy out of your thin air. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, now in New Jersey, these conditions that I just described above, they all apply in New Jersey. This is this is the status quo, and we are realizing that because you lack the status of being documented in the United States, it's enough for you to get deported. And I'm sorry. And you've heard, for instance, if you've read the February 20th DHS memo, it is very clear that just being arrested is enough. You don't need to actually have a conviction. So the priority enforcement requirement is now out the door. If you're arrested and booked, even if the judge says you're free to go, you're still going to be sent to immigration detention. No matter how clean your record is, no matter how many children you have, it is a de facto way of operating. And if anybody says that, well, Trump is still keeping up with the same system that was set in place before, tell the person, no, this is not what we're seeing on the ground. And I know there are people out there who are still adamant. There are also some ICE representatives who are saying, no, this is normal work, we've been doing this forever. But the DHS said himself that they are actually ratcheting up, and they've used the word unshackle, that their staff is unshackle. And during one the testimony before Congress, they said that the staff is now more motivated. So these are signs that, they've seen something very special happen, which is obviously destroying our communities. So we are not in the setup of looking for individuals who pose a danger to public safety, as Obama required before, but we are looking at anybody who has no document to be sent out. And that's basically the rule from which the U.S. government is working right now. And I also want to talk to you about two recent cases here in New Jersey. Currently, there's a case that we were discussing recently that happened in Montclair. There's an undocumented woman who was arrested by the police of Montclair, and after being processed by the judge, she was said she was free to go. But she never had any issues with the police before. But she was automatically sent to immigration detention. And it was just systematic. So just to tell you that, you don't have to commit a crime for you to be deported. It is now, as soon as your status is known as someone who's undocumented, you cannot be deported. And I also want to indicate that Hudson County actually issued, a priority memo to DHS, to ICE, clarifying that they will be deporting people, they will be arresting, they will be booking people based on simple arrest. And the memo is quite clear that they are not looking at previously convicted criminals, but they are going to be booking anybody who has been arrested. So it is definitely, the floodgate that's open. Anybody can be targeted. Nobody's safe. Next slide. All right. So some of these issues about the implications of ICE practices on families have been discussed by, I believe, Erica and Carol. Obviously, we have a family separation. And just imagine a mother of 4 who was doing everything for her family, She's going to lose her house. She's going to, the kids' education is going to be in trouble. I mean, the stability of the entire community. So ultimately, detention does not even help anybody. It doesn't help the government. It doesn't help, the family. It doesn't help your pocketbook because, we, the taxpayer, are the ones, paying for detention. That money that the federal government has that they can spend everywhere they want is not, it's manufactured by us, the taxpayers. So, and obviously it's going to erode the trust in local law enforcement because if they are doing that to your neighbor, because Erica mentioned from the start that immigrants live among us. You cannot really look at someone and say, well, this person is an undocumented immigrant. There's no way of really knowing. It may be the person, cutting your grass. Maybe the person, delivering food at your door. Maybe the person actually your coworker. You never really know. So maybe the person cooking food for you, if you from your favorite restaurant. So this is the very, fabric of the society that's going to be destroyed. And then we see it. We know there are companies out there who are looking to hire people, but they can't simply because, they don't have, a broader pool to draw from. So, and obviously, like Joanna was pointing out, our basic rights are going to be completely pushed to the side, and it's going to be lawlessness. So this is just the beginning. For those who believe by deporting undocumented immigrants, America is safe. It is a very, very bad precedent for a country that's built on the respect of the rule of law and democracy. Next slide. Well, I just want to kind of touch on some of the points on, some of the sectors. We know that, for example, the agricultural sector is in danger. We've heard about some folk from the Republican Party who are actually lobbying the congressman or the senator to be easy when it comes to the agricultural sector. So it's not just like Democrats, trying to push for a stop on immigration deportation, but it's everybody because all the sectors of our economy, are currently being jeopardized. So one of the things that we also need to remember, I know some of our colleagues have already touched on this, our social security system, which many immigrants working illegally out there, contribute to. It's going to be in danger. And so far, I read a report that says that about over the past 10 years, undocumented immigrants have contributed to more than $100 billion to the Social Security Trust Fund. Now, these are billions. So just imagine, these are people financing, all, the social services that we enjoy out here. And so without this contribution of the undocumented immigrants, I can guarantee you the system will be in total jeopardy. So please, let's just stay aware that, when we are working on these issues, it's not because we just want to protect the undocumented. We want to protect the whole country because America's survival depends on the safety, depends on the protection of immigrants. I believe this is the last slide.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Serge. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up the webinar with a call to action and resources. So up here I have a quote that I came upon recently that I really, really love. And when I think about allyship, I think about this quote now. If you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. So the reason why I chose this quote, I think it fits perfectly and it really answers the question of how to be an ally. There are a lot of folks who are new to the movement, and as everyone who presented here mentioned, the problem that's that we're facing right now, these problems with immigration, these are not new. This has been going on for quite a while, but it's really great that folks are coming to the surface and wanting to support. But I just caution folks from falling into the trap of saying, I need to help in a way that victimizes those that they seek to help. It's important to recognize, and I think everyone hit this point, is that everyone is their own free agent. Everyone is a rights-bearing citizen or individual living here. And so it's important not to think that those undocumented folks, immigrants, what have you, don't have rights or are powerless. That's contrary to what's really true. So we cannot think of coming into the movement and that we're coming in to grant folks rights, to grant folks powers. No. Folks are already empowered in their own rights. So I think it's really important that when you're new to a movement, you want to see how you can help. Think about how you could support. There are efforts that are already existing. So the best way that you can be an ally, in my opinion, is to listen and understand where your help is needed and how your help is needed. And that's in contrast to coming in and trying to having an idea of how you can support is different. You need to listen and hear where your support is needed. I think that's the best support that a new ally could provide. I think it's important to also switch the narrative. So I kind of touched on this also, but instead of saying I'm fighting, it is important to think, oh, okay, I'm fighting for rights. But as I said before, folks already have rights. They're free agents, right? So think of it more so as standing next to and fighting beside someone. I think if you look at it that way, it'll be the help that you can offer, the support you can offer is more transformative. So I think the way I look at it, and I'm sure a lot of folks who are listening and look at it the same way, when you see someone's personhood being attacked, it will light up a fire in you. That's why you're here. That's why you want to help. That's why you want to support, rather. I'm trying to stay away from that word help, but of course, I mean, we all want to help. So it's just recognizing that in a united way that unjust treatment against one of us is unjust treatment against all of us because we're all humans. The categories of status, all of those categories that we see, those have been placed socially. They're not inherent categories. And in the end of the day, we're all human beings living in this country together. So we should all be treated with respect and dignity just by virtue of being humans. So that's another important switch in narrative that you can keep in mind that when you want to stand beside folks in the movement. Another thing is, I mentioned this just now, but immigrants are just not a class or category of people. I'm a child of immigrants. A lot of my close family members and friends are immigrants or children of immigrants. They don't look at themselves as a separate class of people. They do remember where they have come from, but they also are very proud of where they are today. So it's important to remember that just how as you or your friend might have grown up in the U.S., folks who have come to the U.S. Also see themselves as American citizens. So it's best not to distinguish us from one another. And as I said, just see this as a united struggle that we're all in together. So that's the best I can put about how to be an ally. And so providing information to the community. So again, it's really important that if you see a need in your community, maybe you're in a large immigrant population in your community, and you want to see how you can help, it's really worth checking in with locals and impacted communities first. I can never stress it enough that you will be doing yourself a disservice by not working beside folks who are impacted. It's very important. They're the ones who are going to be able to tell you what needs or help they might need, what support they might need. So if you want to provide information to the community, you should go check in with your locals. Everything is context specific, so there's no go-to formula, but it's important. I think a great thing to do is to just get in touch with a trusted community leader. There's church leaders, there are organizational leaders who are working with impacted community members side by side and who will be able to tell you, okay, we might need more information on this or we might need resources on that. But it's important to first check in with them because they'll be able to tell you best. And you can provide information accordingly. A great example of this is Know Your Rights workshops. That's a huge thing that's going on right now, and it's important that if you recognize a need or you think there's a need, it's important to, and you want to run a Know Your Rights workshop, go to a trusted community leader and ask them, are your community members in need of a Know Your Rights workshop, or if not, maybe what are their needs, and then you can plan accordingly. They'll help point you to where the needs are and how to get information out to the community, because every community has a different way of how, and a different point person that helps get this information around. And the last thing you can do is you can support existing activism, and I mentioned this in the beginning. Those who are affected know best about what needs to be done to fight for their recognition, their personhood, and their rights. And as I said, the fight for immigrant rights is not new. It's been out there for a long time. There are strategies in place. Folks know what to do. So just ask how you can support. Your efforts should not supersede or replace existing efforts. They should just support them. So chances are there are folks all over the state who are mobilizing. You might not hear about them. They might not be a part of national or regional organizations. They might just be part of grassroots efforts that are local. And these efforts, don't get me wrong, are, in my opinion, some of the most transformative efforts. Grassroots efforts, in my opinion, and I'm sure everybody would agree with me, are those that will have the best impact on folks. So maybe there are folks who are already mobilizing. Join them. Everybody can always use more voices, can use more people. Maybe there's some people that you might know that, like contacts, that might be able to benefit. Just being an ally in general alongside of efforts that are already there is powerful enough. So, yep, that's going to be the end of my call there, because we have 5 minutes and we have a few questions. So I can get to answering those. I'm just going to put the thank you slide with contact information. And my apologies, this should say njimmigrantjustice.org/resources with an S. So just make sure you type that in. And I'll try to have all this information over to you by tomorrow. So yeah, I can go through questions now. And I guess whoever thinks that they can best answer the question can just go ahead, because all presenters are unmuted. So our first question was, do you know how many have been detained in New Jersey since the new administration came in? Have things changed so far? Anyone able?
Well, this is Serge here.
Yep,
go ahead,
whoever.
Serge. I don't know. I was going to add something. Go ahead,
Serge, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I just want to say that it is a very fluid system, but I can tell you that a lot of Haitians have been detained in New Jersey. We've seen, for example, at some point they were up to 300, and then suddenly they were all deported to the point there were only 30 left. After just a few weeks. So it's a very fluid system. They bring many in and then they ship some out. And they move them around. It is as we know, it's a very shady system. You have to be, even when you ask for numbers, they don't really tell you. You just hear that there was a bus who was just here. You saw a bus, leaving the center, taking them to the airport because they're being shipped to Louisiana, which is one of the big ports for deportation. So it's a fluid system, but there was increasingly a lot of people being detained. I cannot give you the number. I can only tell you about this particular case of Haitians where we've seen them come in droves and be deported also.
I just want to add that at Wind of the Spirit Immigrant Resource Center, we get calls from people all throughout the Obama administration about ICE being present or ICE visiting a community, and those calls have increased since this new administration came to power. In my own hometown of Dover, there's plenty of rumors and fears, but actual reports of ICE coming to people's doors and looking to detain and deport immigrants, just the texts and the emails and even Facebook messages that I receive have increased under this new administration. But like Serge said, I don't have specific numbers because they are not transparent. They'll even say, no, there is no surge, but we'll know that there is. We'll see that people are being moved. So it's not a transparent system.
Awesome, thank you. I'll go to the next question. And folks, we're going to try to go through all of them. I know it's almost time, but if you want to hang in for a little bit longer, hopefully we won't go too far over. So the next question is, if a person was previously deported and then re-enters, are they charged criminally and then they have a right to an attorney?
So anyone charged with a criminal offense always, regardless of immigrant status, has a right to an attorney if they cannot afford one, thanks to our Constitution, thanks to Gideon's Army and the Gideon case. So if that person is in criminal court and they're being charged criminally for their reentry, then yes, they would have the right to a criminal attorney. But that's not usually the way that it works. They are usually, well, there are many ways that could work, but the problem is expedited removal. So at the border, somebody, if they're crossing, somebody could be deported immediately without even seeing a judge. So there wouldn't be an attorney because there would be a case. Or the other way that could work is that they aren't brought into criminal proceedings, they are brought into removal proceedings, which is an immigration law proceeding, which is a civil proceeding, and you do not have a right to an attorney in a civil proceeding. So that person may be in removal proceedings before a judge, but based on civil immigration law, so then no, they would not have a right to an attorney.
Great. Thank you so much, Carol. I know that, Carol, you put some resources in the chat box, but the questions were, how can we get a copy of our county's jail agreement with ICE to act as a detention facility? And just to add on, who makes the ultimate decision on whether a county jail will act as a detention center, the sheriff, the freeholders, or someone else?
So, I mean, my guess, based on this is Joanna, based on what we've done with other, and AFSD has helped with and the ACLU have helped with this, is that you can submit an OPRA request to your county to find out what their current policy is, and that will ultimately give you a better understanding of what their current policy is. So you would have to submit an OPRA request because some of them don't have these policies outright. And then you can ask for a copy of the 287G agreement through an OPRA request, because that should be public. I believe they're also posted on the USCIS website, but I'm not 100% sure. But we can definitely send you all the information once we have it. So there are ways for you to see who signed the contract, who signed the agreement. It changes depending on the county. Usually it's the person who's in charge of the jail in terms of the 287G specifically. But we have seen, for instance, in Hudson County, where the county executive is the one that signed it off. And so it really depends on the county. It's possible that your county sheriff, your county, your warden, your executive, it really depends on the county. So you have to find out who signed that agreement. So you can OPRA request it. OPRA request also what their policy. So for the non-287G counties, you might also need to request what their current detainer policies look like. So who do you hold for immigration and why? Because you don't need to have a 287G to hold someone on behalf of ICE. So that's important for you to check, because then that can give you a better understanding of whether they're using administrative warrants or judicial warrants, whether they're holding somebody beyond 48 hours, which is illegal, things like that. Find out what they're doing. Are they communicating with ICE? Are they calling ICE? Is ICE walking to their jails? I mean, they don't need contracts and 287G agreements to do that. So in any county across the state, you should be able to OPRA request those policies.
And just to clarify, OPRA stands for the Open Public Records Act, and it can be a simple form that you submit demanding certain records from any public entity.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. This is not such a question, but someone's asking if they want to approach their county to get rid of the 287G status in Monmouth. Do we have talking points that they can give to freeholders? We were working on it.
Yeah, yes and no. yes, we have some talking points, and there are some strategies that we've been working on just in general on 287G. AFSC has some great stuff on 287G. However, in terms of Monmouth County, and I think I've talked to a few folks there, you have to touch base with the organizations that are already there. You have Casa Freehold that has been in Monmouth County for a while. You've got New Labor that works out of the areas as well. You've got organizations that have been working with folks from Monmouth County for a very long time. They are better off to start the strategy on how you're going to approach it, because you might want to talk to the freeholders and talk about it, but you also might have to strategize first to find out who are the friendly freeholders, who do you actually want to talk to. Is there some political power dynamic that you have to be aware of before you approach them, because you might approach the wrong one and suddenly you're in a pickle trying to talk about something when they maybe decided to do the exact opposite of what you chose to do. So it's really important for you to be strategic, which is why, as Dina said, touch base with the already existing advocates and actions going on, because the fight in Monmouth County, as in Hudson and as in any of these fights, didn't just come up under Trump. They have been in I think Monmouth County, their contract is like 10 years long. So it's been around for a while. There are plenty of advocates who've been fighting that also. And so they can tell you what has already been done and what has not been done, what talking points have they already used that did not work. So I suggest you touch base first with the immigrant rights organizations and the advocates on the ground to find out what exactly is the strategy and what your next steps are going to look like before you just go ahead and have meetings like that, especially in places like Monmouth County, where I know for a fact they've been meeting with folks. And if you are in some place across the state and you're trying to find out if there's already somebody there, shoot us an email. We probably know who's already there and probably have an update to you on what's happening already.
If I may add to that and stress the importance of what Dina and Joanna are saying about touching base and working with the local community organizing against this. As we said, this fight is not new under Trump. And respecting partisan politics and the importance that plays. Please know that every county is different. Any municipality is different. For us in Morris County, we are strategizing to help our towns with the highest immigrant populations adopt a fair and welcoming community strategy. So that would be Dover, Parsippany, Morristown. And there is a strategy and there is a system, and there's been a lot of work that's been put into this. So, and our freeholders in Morris County are not going to pass a fair and welcoming community resolution. We fought them on 287G and won, but it was a long, arduous process that included a lot of facts. So when we are fighting a battle, and I'm sorry to use war analogy, but you're on the attack on one front or two fronts or three fronts. If someone that goes to approach the freeholders and is not in on the strategy, then we may be forced to respond on the defensive on that front. So even if you are trying to help, we want the freeholders to come in. If those freeholders are not going to support it, we are now forced to fight a defensive fight in addition to the offensive we may be fighting in specific municipalities. So make sure that you are tapped in with the organizers on the ground, with the impacted community, to make sure that your efforts to help do actually help and are effective.
Great. Thank you for that, Carol. I think that answers another question that was here about fighting partisan politics. So I'll go over that question, and if the individual who asked wants to follow up, just let me know. But I'm gonna go past that one. So another question: I live in a very red area. How would I know if the leaders aren't pro-deportation?
So I think all of us have been in positions where we've been asking folks. I think you can either ask for a one-on-one meeting and say, hey, I really want us to be a welcoming community. Don't get into, specifics in terms of policy or whatever until you know what's going on, but feel them out, see what they say. They might say, nope, I think they all deserve to be deported, and that's that. And find out a bit more of where they stand. They might have made some statements. They might have not. Sometimes talking to them one-on-one might give you a better understanding. Find out who they know. Sometimes they might have relationships with the local clergy. And so somebody might be able to tell you because they've had conversations about the issue. Often you're likely to find out from other folks either like, especially now, because I feel like now it's become such a polarizing time that folks who have any opinion on either side are more likely to have said something to somebody. They might have posted on their Facebook page. They might have gone to an event that was pro-immigrant. They might have gone to a meeting of refugees. Suddenly you can get a better idea of sort of where they stand. But you have, this issue and this work, it oftentimes turns into sort of like recon and information gathering very strategically before I think it depends on where you're going and where you are. We've seen folks who go to council meetings and say during public comments, where do you stand on this particular issue? And you're not saying you should support it or you should not support it. You're just asking where they stand. It depends on the city. It depends on the county. It depends on where they are. But that's something you can potentially start doing to just get a better idea of where folks stand.
Okay, next question is which counties have a 287G agreement? I think I can answer that because I've heard it very often. It's Hudson, Monmouth, Cape May, and Salem, right? That's it?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So that's that. Okay, so for a county to prolong detention because of immigration status, do they need a 287G agreement or can they just honor a detainer because they want to with no specific agreement in place?
So I think Serge and Carol can jump in as well, but basically it depends on the county, but yeah, they can hold someone without a detainer request. Some counties will say, well, we really want to help ICE, so we just held the person until they called back. We called ICE to let them know we got this person who seems undocumented, and we think they're undocumented, so we're just going to wait till ICE comes and pick them up. It's possible, and we have to think of it like they're not thinking of this as this like I'm gonna put you in jail and deport you. It's not. It sometimes it doesn't even come from this. I mean, we know those of us who work with immigrant communities where that comes from, but sometimes their logic is I'm trying to help the federal government. I'm trying to help the federal agents. I'm trying to help enforcement. I'm trying to help law and public safety, especially in law enforcement. That's where they come from. So they might do that. The other side of that, though, is that they might be triggering constitutional issues. And so they might assume someone's undocumented and hold them. That person may not be undocumented, and then that person could sue them, right? So for racial profiling, which has happened, which is why law enforcement across the country have said they don't want to get into these kind of agreements because it gets into liability issues for the counties because you could get sued. So it depends on the county, but yes, they don't necessarily have to have a 287G agreement or a bed contract to hold folks on behalf of ICE. Sometimes they don't even need a detainer to do it. I mean, they're not supposed to, but they will if they feel like that is something they should be doing. They might be the detainer could come from ICE, where ICE might have gotten triggered through fingerprinting that they saw that someone came through the county jail. Like ICE doesn't need to get a phone call to know that. But so ICE might call them and say, hey, I saw through the system that so-and-so showed up. Can you please hold them? Some counties could be just really proactive and say, hey, so-and-so came through and they look undocumented or they seem undocumented. Or we asked them for their immigration status and they said they're undocumented. You should come pick them up. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an official agreement to happen.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Joanna is saying. I mean, you talking about case of ICE just driving by and say, hey, I just want to stop by and see what you have there. I mean, these are hilarious stories. They don't need anything to pick you up, and that's the most troubling part in all of this. So basically, all these rules means nothing. They can just come in and just pick you up and for a phone call, a text message, anything. Sometimes some of the local law enforcement, they do that to look cool, to say, hey, we're working with ICE, just to give themselves a small pat on the back. And we need to remember that they are not obligated to do anything, even when they receive the detainer. They can just sit back and let it go.
Thanks, Serge. I have 3 questions here that I'm just going to quickly answer because Joanna mentioned this earlier. So for folks who are asking about actions done in specific counties and to find out what groups exist, I have this info email right here. Just send us an email about that, and I'll answer you as soon as possible. And then for who's active in Monmouth County, Casa Freehold is one of them. But if you want more information, again, folks who are looking for area-specific information, just send an email to the address that's up here. So the next question, the ACLU has drafted basic principles on a national level to use. Are there more Jersey-specific versions that you have that you can recommend? We had a very welcoming webinar where we discussed this, so I think it's important to first go through that information. And if I'm not mistaken, Joanna, we have our model policies online, or trying to remember.
I don't think we have our model policy online, but what you could do is send us an email to the info email. We are also working with the ACLU of New Jersey. They have been really monumental in the work that we're doing on the model policies in terms of local policies. There's a lot of statewide and specific New Jersey specific stuff that we have to be aware of that is in that webinar. So we can send you that webinar because it's not online yet. We're putting it up shortly, but we can send that to you, and then we can also put you in touch if you're not already in touch with the ACLU of New Jersey, because they are also supporting a lot of the folks from the People Power movement and others on what exactly, how we sort of work with both strategies within the People Power strategies and also implementing state-specific stuff. So email us, and then we'll let you know exactly what's going on, and we'll put two and two together. But the answer to your question is yes, we have New Jersey-specific policies. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the People Power, it's just 9-point questions that you're, or I guess issues, policies, positions that you're asking from localities. We actually have the draft law, so you can just hand it to them and they can do what they should be doing. So just touch base with us and we'll give you that information.
Okay, so last question, and folks, thanks so much for staying on a little bit extra. This is the last question we're going to take because we're a little bit over. And thank you, Carol, for being so vigilant to answer people's questions. I appreciate that in the chat box. So the last question is, where do moms who are being deported and have kids born in New Jersey, where can they go to get a free power of attorney so their children may stay with somebody who does have status in America? I can answer that. So basically, you just want, if you want for free power of attorneys, there are workshops that are going on. I don't think there are any coming up right now, but if you would like to email me also at the info email, and we can discuss that a little bit more, and maybe we can try to arrange maybe another clinic or something. That's the best way that we can do it.
And there's also a webinar, right?
Right.
The webinar?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For what?
There's a webinar on the power of attorneys, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, also, okay, so yeah, just email me. I'll give you all the information, info@immigrantjustice.org. Email me and I'll send you the webinar, and I'll also help you out with that.
And yeah, also the power of attorney, we do have a sample of it on the website, on the resources page of the website, and that's where we also have the webinar if you want to plug in and just know what it's all about.
Oh, and Carol also answered. Thanks, Carol.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yes, sorry everyone, a little bit later than expected, but I hope that this was helpful to everybody, and I want to thank all the speakers so much for spending their Tuesday night on the phone with us. And of course, again, if anyone has any more questions, just email the contact information that you see here, and I hope, again, that you found this helpful and that everyone has a good night. Thanks again for joining.
Good night. Thank you, everyone,
Thank you.
so much. Bye-bye.